at Waverley Council. Before we start, I just wanted to firstly acknowledge the Bidjigal and Gadigal people who traditionally occupied the Sydney coast and pay respect to all elders of all the lands where we are based today. We're really happy to bring this webinar to you tonight as part of our online event series for Plastic Free July and our efforts to reduce waste and also promote a circular economy in collaboration with a bunch of really dedicated, passionate, fantastic local environmental groups. This webinar is really about unpacking some of the issues lurking in our collective wardrobes and the easy things we can do to stay stylish with less impact. I, for one, am a lover of fashion, and as you can tell from my stylish headphones, but it really is a webinar I'm really interested in personally and professionally. From watching the True Cost recently, and also from what we know, I just want to start with a few sobering facts that you may want to think about during the discussions tonight. So the first startling fact is that fashion is the #2 polluting industry on Earth, second only to oil industry. In Australia, it's worth noting that it's estimated that between 500,000 and 800,000 tonnes of textiles are disposed in landfills annually. And they're not biodegradable mostly, so they actually sit in landfill for over 200 years, emitting harmful gases. Fashion in the bin can't really be recovered properly at the moment. We don't have the recycling capacity to do that, but apparently that's changing, which is really encouraging. And locally, clothing and apparel accounts for around 6% of all the garbage in our bin, which sounds a lot, very little, but it's actually astonishing the amount of stuff that we throw out. There's also a downward trend that we're seeing in how many wears we get per garment. And the True Cost documentary has really kind of exposed not only the environmental costs, which our team is really interested in, but the human rights and health and social impacts. But there's good news. In Waverley, we're doing our best to divert this textile waste from landfill. And at the end of last year, we diverted over 3 tonnes of textiles for reuse and repurposing from a textile collection trial we're doing with apartment buildings. We'll send a link about that in an email following this webinar. And there are a myriad of technological and solutions for fibre recycling that are emerging here and overseas. So it's really heartening to see. But the hard truth is you can have the best recycling systems in the world, but we also need to change our own behaviour. So this webinar will hopefully help shine a light on some of the many practical solutions literally at our fingertips. So a few housekeeping things to start. Just to mention, if you have any tech issues, post them in the chat and we'll try and sort that out. We'll be launching a couple of polls, so, just to make it a bit more interactive and get your feedback. We'll also be recording the webinar, so and we'll send a link with a follow-up email in the next week. And also, if in terms of viewing the panelists, it's good to select gallery view in the top right-hand corner of your screen, so you can see all the speakers. So I'm proud and excited to welcome Clare Press, presenter of the Wardrobe Crisis podcast on sustainable fashion, to run this webinar and conversations with these fantastic esteemed panelists we're grateful to have on this webinar joining us tonight. So thanks again, and over to you, Clare.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nicola, and thank you everyone at the team at Waverley Council. Can I just say that it is phenomenal and important for community and for councils to get behind the change. This can't all happen. It can't be all on us as consumers, but nor can it all be on federal government and regulators. When we see local councils get behind this stuff, it's terrific. And just when you said there that you're trialing the textile collection in apartment buildings, I just wanted to punch the air. It's so great. So, as Nicola mentioned, my name is Clare Press and I am the presenter of a podcast called Wardrobe Crisis, but mostly what I am is a kind of waste warrior who spends a hell of a lot of time worrying about, advocating for change around and trying to combat fashion waste. It's kind of my favourite topic, so I was really pleased that we got this chance to talk about it here today. I'm going to welcome our fantastic speakers. But before I do that, I wanted to take this moment just to share a little bit of context around the absolutely outrageous, disgusting and crazy situation with fashion and textile waste. And Nicola did just touch on a few stats there, but I've got some more for you. And this is a bit of a global kind of look at it. I'm not sure if many of you are familiar, put it in the chat if you are, with the work of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. She does amazing work around the circular economy, and I also work with them as an ambassador for their Make Fashion Circular initiative. But if you want to dig deep onto this, you can download a free report from her, and we'll share a link, or from that foundation, and we'll share a link. It's called The New Textiles Economy, and it came out in 2017. And a lot of the stats that we work with come from this collation of incredible material around just how much we waste. And one of them that I always am surprised to hear, even though I've heard it every day, just every time I hear it, it really motivates me. And it is this, that every second around the world, one garbage truck of textiles and clothing is incinerated or enters landfill. Every second. It's absolutely bananas. Now, as Nicola mentioned, we are producing more and more clothes than ever before. So I think it's something now, it was, according to that Ellen MacArthur report, I think 100 billion garments that we were producing annually, which was doubled in 15 years. But that stat comes from 2015. So we can imagine that it's even more now. And at the same time, as Nicola mentioned, clothing utilization. So that's how much we wear our clothes, how long we keep them, but also keep actively using them. That has plummeted. So more clothes being worn and cared for and appreciated less, and more landfill. Now, Australian stats, hard to come by. These ones are quite old. I think they come from 1995 or something. I'd like to see more data. We actually don't. We have a data hole in Australia, but around how much we waste. But the stats are, Australians are the second largest consumers of textiles and clothing. Do you guys know this? After North Americans. Shocking. And per capita, we're consuming 28 kilos of the stuff. And guess how much? Pop it in the chat if you know anything about this. Guess how much we dispatch to the tip or get rid of those 28. It is, does anyone know? Pipe up if you know. Alex, do you know this?
Yeah, 23.
Give us a guess. Yes. Thank you. A shocking and revolting 23 out of those 28 kilos we're getting rid of. So that is crazy. Now, just briefly, that's part of the story. But before we go blaming young women as it's all their fault, young women running out buying a new frock to wear on the weekend, that is not the case. The story of our textile and clothing waste is universal. It's all of us. It's kids' clothes, it's uniforms, it's gym kit, it's what your men wear to work, women wear to work. It's everyone of all ages consuming more and more clothes, less and less mindfully. And just a word on those stats, we're not just talking about fashion, we're talking about textiles. So it could be your towels, it could be your curtains, and I don't know why I said curtains, probably not throwing those away often, but it could be bedding, it could be, I don't know, napier tablecloths, but all of the textiles that we have in our lives, we are wasting. So without further ado, that was a bit of a grim picture. Actually, I'm going to ask you to just do the poll before I interview the panelists. So we want to start with one question, which is, and we'll flash this up, please do answer it because then we can get an idea about how you guys are all doing and be honest. I'll be honest too, none of us is perfect. But which best describe your wardrobe? It's multiple choice, too many clothes, nothing to wear, or carefully curated. Thank you. And we'll share that in a moment. Now, without further ado, I would love to introduce our fabulous panel. We're joined by three awesome speakers, and I'm so delighted to see your lovely faces and to introduce you now. Welcome to Sandra Capponi, co-founder of our very favourite sustainable shopping app, Good On You. Welcome to Alex Van Os, sustainable stylist, op shop obsessive and expert, and Timothy Go, who as well as being retail sales and marketing manager for an extraordinary organisation called The Social Outfit, which is a social enterprise based in Sydney, is also, I believe, a fashion student. Is that right, Timothy?
That is correct. Yep.
Awesome. Now, I've talked enough. I want to just dive in quickly with perhaps something about the true cost. I'm not sure when you guys last saw it. I'm presuming you've watched it maybe more than once, but perhaps you might take it in turns just to tell us why you care about sustainable fashion, and then tell us how you define it, and perhaps also mention what you think about the issues raised in the True Cost film. I'd like to begin with you, Sandra.
there. I definitely have seen the true cost numerous times, and each time it's just as impactful. I think I cry every time. It really touches me, because, you know, it goes to the core of issues that I've cared about for a long time. And as a fellow lover of fashion, I'm sure many people that have joined today also love fashion. It just seems so wrong to me that an industry that's supposed to represent beauty and help shape identity in a positive way could actually be the cause of, you know, harm to people and the planet. So the true cost was super impactful, because it shone a light on those issues that I really cared about. But it was actually, it came out just after we launched Good On You. And so, you know, basically helped raise the conversation and awareness around what we as an organisation were advocating for and pushing for change in.
Yeah, awesome. Timothy, do you want to just try and define that term for us first of all, maybe? What does sustainable fashion mean to you?
To me, I think the definition of sustainable fashion is really fashion that doesn't come at the cost of anyone else. It doesn't come at the cost of the planet, and it doesn't come at the cost of the people that are making the garments. And that kind of is that's the idea that I always remember when I am doing my work, whether it's working here at the Social Outfit or as a design student. I think, you know, it's sobering, because really in actuality, the world doesn't really need more clothes. And so to me, part of sustainable fashion is trying to figure out how can we best utilize what we already have on this earth and not turn to what is new. And I think the True Cost did a really great job of exploring that idea, and it turned a lot of people on and started getting them to ask questions about why things are being made and how they're being made and where they're coming from.
Fantastic. Alex, what are your thoughts on the true cost? And perhaps you might also tell us, how do we define that? You know, that word sustainability, it can be overused, but what's your definition of it and what does it mean to you?
So sustainable fashion to me, it is exactly like what Timothy said, those garments that don't impact people and our planet. And I do believe that our fashion, the clothes that we wear and that we choose to wear, can be for a force for good and can create positive change. What I found really fascinating with the True Cost, it really made the viewers and myself included reflect upon our consumerist behavior. I will never forget the images of those shoppers standing waiting on like Black Friday or something, trying to rush the stores. Yeah. And that's just a horror scene. And then also those girls sitting there, you know, holding up those clothes going, oh, I don't even know if I'm going to wear this on YouTube or whatever it is. That, again, that's a horror film. And I think it really makes the audience reflect upon their own shopping behaviors.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to share the results of that first poll so that we can see who's telling the truth. No, we can't tell. So it's about 50-50 of saying I've got too many clothes versus I've got a carefully curated wardrobe, and only 2% said I've got nothing to wear. So that's interesting. We'll come back to that. Now, Sandra, I gave you a job to do, didn't I, when we prepped this? I was asking if you might do that job of giving us a little bit of an overview on what a circular textiles economy for fashion might look like. And I just wanted to share with everyone here that when I shared those grotty stats with you about just how much we throw away when it comes to fashion waste, I also wanted to mention that it's creative resources that we're wasting. So yes, we're wasting all of the natural resources and the precious resources like water, for example, and energy that have been used in the manufacturing of clothes. But let's not forget that somebody designs them and pours all their creative energy into the clothes that we throw away too. Sandra, let's talk about what a circular fashion economy means. What does it look like? And why is it important in this conversation?
Yeah, I think we've already spoken so much about the huge amounts of waste caused by the fashion industry, and at the core of this is the traditional linear model of making something, using something, and then throwing it away, which, when you think about it, is inherently sustainable. So the circular fashion model is about turning that line into a closed loop and eliminating waste in how we're making fashion, and putting used garments back into the system It really starts from design, you know, thinking about how we make clothes in a way so that they're not producing excessive amounts of waste, so that they're made in a way that they can last for a longer period of time. And they're made with materials that can be recycled or put back in the system, as I said. And then after the design, it's about keeping used garments in the system for as long as possible, through secondhand clothing, of course, but also some creative business models that have emerged recently, like rental schemes and clothing swaps. Of course, mending and repurposing clothes is a big part of that as well. And the final thing is really when there is no more use for the garment, nobody else can love that item. It's thinking about how we can recycle those textiles into new materials, which seems like a bit of a no-brainer, surely a really, really critical part of the solution, but is actually so far from where we're at today.
It's not happening. I just read in Sourcing Journal a new report that came out, and I can't remember the exact stats on it, but it was something like half of the industry has got goals around circularity, and most of them, I'll find it and you can share the actual stats, basically think it's going to take more than 5 years to reach a real circular economy in fashion. So we've got a lot of work to do. I was also thinking when you said that, and this is a question to throw to those of us who've joined us, I don't know the answer, but what's COVID-19 mean for secondhand and rental? Because people are rightly, I'm sure, nervous about sharing textiles and, I don't know, touching things that they need to keep safe. So I'm not sure where that's playing out. And I think that maybe also culturally people are freaking out and they just, even if there is no danger, they don't want to do it. I don't know. We'll come back to that.
More affordable options for people. You know, COVID has also made it difficult for people to afford new clothes and secondhand and rental alternatives.
Another Ellen MacArthur statistic, less than 1% of textiles are currently remanufactured into new textiles. So textile to textile recycling. So often when you see recycled fibre, it's in fact come from PET bottles. So it's plastic to textile recycling, a slightly different thing. Alex, what's your take? We talked about Plastic Free July at the opener of this webinar. Now, Rebecca Prinz-Ruiz, who is the founder of that organisation, she's an Aussie, yes, is now global, just like good on you. She talks about if your kitchen was flooded, you wouldn't just mop it up, you'd turn off the tap first, right? I mean, it seems obvious, and yet we haven't quite put that together with this idea of fashion waste yet, I don't think. Alex, in all of your experience of being op shop obsessed and also seeing what goes on behind the scenes, what can you tell us about what happens to our clothes when we donate them?
Yeah, so when we take them to our local op shops, they go through our donations and really look for those items that are of the best quality and of the best condition. So they will take those clothes that are of the best condition and be able to put them on the floor straight away. But it's those clothing and those items that aren't in the greatest condition that they can't actually resell. So this is an issue because then they have to find other ways to be able to pass these garments on. And op shops within Australia are spending $13 million a year.
Is that right?
Yeah, to actually pass on our textiles, not just our textiles, also bric-a-brac and all of that sort of thing. But so what happens is often the clothing gets exported to developing countries to either be resold in their market or also to be recycled, shredded and that sort of thing. So as we donate clothes, it makes us feel good because it feels like we're giving our clothes a new life, but it really is important to think about the clothes and asking ourselves a question, would you pass on this garment to a friend, or even would you even buy it from an op shop in that condition that you're going to donate it? Because if not, then there's something, you don't want to pass it on to an op shop and then be a burden. So I really recommend cleaning your items as clean as possible and also mending them before you pass them on. But otherwise, there is a great organization called Man Rags, and they will pick up for $25. You pay $25. They'll pick up a box of 10 kilos of your items, and then
isn't it only socks?
No, they do clothing and shoes now. So it's super exciting, especially for shoes. Like, so often we wear our shoes to, you know, to death, and sending them to an op shop is really awful, because what are they going to do with it? So Man Rags will collect them and then repurpose them.
We'll share a link to this organization or this brand, or it's more than a brand. So they make sustainable socks, and they have a circular model behind what they do. They're called Man Rags, only in Australia at the moment, but we'll share a link. Alex, just tell us why you know about this stuff. So how do you work with the Red Cross?
Yeah, so I'm an op shop Red Cross ambassador. And I have done volunteering in some of the stores and in one of my local ones here in Newport. And I've seen the donations that have come in, and you can get stuff from incredible designer, top quality pieces to people's really old underwear and bras. And I think for those sorters, for those volunteers, they're all volunteers.
They're all volunteers.
They're opening these bags and they have no idea what to expect. So we have to remember that as donators, that someone else with their own hands will be going through your donations.
And also that in charity shops all around the world, most of the people who are doing this are volunteers, and they don't want to be used as an alternative to the tip. Timothy, can we talk about donations? So tell us, well, first of all, tell us a little bit about the social outfit and what it does and how it works, particularly with dead stock. And first of all, you might just define that term for us, because I'm not sure put in the chat if you're familiar with the word dead stock and if you know what that means in the fashion context. But Timothy, could you explain it for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Dead stock is quite a broad term, and I think sometimes it's used interchangeably with other terms like remnant and donated and end of roll fabrics. And it has been subject to a bit of greenwashing in some cases. But for the purpose for which the social outfit kind of views it as, dead stock fabric is basically fabric that's no longer in production, and it's often in quite limited small quantities, which means that for the most part, bigger fashion labels don't really care much to use it up, because you can imagine a fashion label is not going to want to make a hit dress and then only have 20 meters of fabric with which to make it. So that's kind of where we come in as the social outfit. And basically, we're a not-for-profit fashion label. We produce everything on site. I'm actually sitting in the workroom.
Are you? That's nice.
Yeah, I'm just upstairs, and we've got a store downstairs as well. We are dedicated to providing employment for refugee and new migrant women. That's kind of our main mission, is empowering women through employment. But a secondary kind of part of what we do that sometimes gets shadowed by the great humanitarian work that we do is that we use almost exclusively dead stock and donated remnant fabrics. And so which that means is basically we will get dead stock fabric from dead stock merchants. It's very, very limited quantities, which means that sometimes when we make a style, we don't even have enough to make it in a full size run. We'll make, 3 pieces, and then we'll sell it, and we'll move on to another fabric that's being donated, or that's being kind of given to us. And
often you are having fabric donated by Australian designers. There's that element of it too, right?
Yes, absolutely. So we get donations from Bianca Spender, from Q, a lot of different Sea Folly as well. A lot of different Australian labels have been very generous in donating fabric to us, and we take that fabric and we are able to reuse it and turn it into a beautiful garment that someone can come in and purchase. And
it's just, I just think it's such a beautiful business model, because you've got the social side, it's completely values driven, but you're also thinking about waste at every level. And like you say, it's not something everyone knows the social, but actually you're being environmentally as sound as you can be too.
That's exactly it. And to this date, we diverted 6 tons of fabric from landfill. That's which is a big win for us. But also, there's another side to what we do, and sometimes people don't realize, is that it's not just donated fabric that we utilize. It's also donated trims, donated elastics, it's buckles, it's zippers. And I'm actually in the workroom, so I can do a bit of show and tell.
Yeah,
But
go on.
for example, I've got a little buckle here.
Ah.
And this is a donated buckle. It is plastic. It's a donated buckle from Alice McCall. And basically they were dye lots. So they were dyed, they were originally white, they were dyed a color, and it didn't quite come out the way that they wanted to. But rather than throwing them to landfill and having them sit there for 200 years, they donated it to us, and we were able to turn them into our beautiful pinafores.
It's so good. And also, thank you, Timothy. And please do comment, and we'll get to your questions at the end, everyone. But I wonder how much of you know about this whole idea of pre-consumer and post-consumer waste. So when we talk about these terms, pre-consumer is all the waste that comes before the garment has ever reached the store or been bought. So things like dye lots going wrong, or fabric not coming out right, or I don't know, mismatched bolts, or all these things can drive textile waste. Sandra, I want to talk to you about values. Timothy has just told us a beautiful story about a business that is purely values driven and led, which I love. But that's something that's very intrinsic to how Good On You works, isn't it? I mean, values-led fashion is kind of what you're all about, right? Tell us why it's becoming so popular and how it works, and then talk to us about the business model for Good On You. But I'm really interested in your take on whether you think more people are really looking for values-driven brands, or if that's all talk.
It's the reason why we exist. I don't think we would be, such a valuable tool for so many people if they weren't looking for information on the impact of brands and wanting to make choices based on their values. For years now, people have been concerned about issues in fashion and wanting to do something about it, and voting with their wallet is a really powerful way to do something about it. There's also some, stats that support this. I often refer to a report that came out from List for a few years in a row now. They're a global search platform for fashion, and sustainability related searches for clothing on their platform increased 75% last year from the previous year, and already 37% since the start of this year.
Wow.
So people are, shopping for sustainable items, and that's great, because it means that they will then support brands like Social Outfit, and with their collective power actually shift the rest of the industry to step up and change too.
So how does it work? For those who are not aware of Good On You, here's your opportunity to plug it. Tell us how it works. So obviously you can search brands according to different values. How does that work?
So we rate brands on 3 things that we know are important for sustainability and that we know we all care about, and that's a brand's impact on people, the planet, and animals. We've rated thousands of fashion brands, so you can literally look up any brand that you're interested in knowing about, from the high street brand, your favourite brand, or maybe a new one that you're looking to discover. And if you're not so happy with the rating, then we're giving suggestions and recommendations on similar brands, similar in terms of price and style and location, all the things that matter, but do better on these issues.
What happens if you can't figure out your values? And that might sound ridiculous. And if you're thinking that, please just bear with me. I think it can be quite hard for people in general just to figure out what they really care about when it comes to all this complexity. I mean, Alex, if you're a vegan, that's fine. You're going to look for a brand that doesn't use any animal products. But if you're just new to this conversation and you're not really sure about all the complexity around the issues on unsustainable fashion, we're talking about waste, we've mentioned supply chains, and if you've watched The True Cost, you can see that often the system squeezes garment workers, but this stuff can feel quite overwhelming, I reckon. Do you have a take on this? And what would you say, what would be your advice as a stylist, for example, on where we might start if we're coming at this fresh?
Well, I do think it's important just to start with choose one value. I mean, I think most of us should be able to connect with one thing in this world that we're passionate about and that we feel is a worthy cause. And so I do look at it from a people, our environment, and an animal perspective, I guess similar to Good On You as well. because in that way we can kind of break down what is available to us. So, you know, if we're thinking about the environment, that means that we can look for pieces that the fabrics are, you know, natural or organic. We're not putting as much CO2 emissions into the air with all the transport. Also, it looks after the second-hand economy, because it's stopping clothing from going into landfill. So that's kind of like one aspect, let's say, for the environment. Then if you've got people, it can be locally made. So you really see the people maybe who are making your clothes. Also secondhand, again, because you're giving back to charity, or even with like consignment, you know, you're supporting locally owned small businesses. And then with animals, it's, you know, not animal derived products, or it then goes, okay, well, if you're going to be going down the synthetic route, then purchasing garments that are made from recycled fabrics or PET bottles, that sort of thing.
So if you sit down with a client who comes to you because they want to have a fantastic wardrobe, and perhaps they have an interest in vintage, do you talk them through the stuff? Tell us how you work, and perhaps you might tell us a story about how it began for you.
Yeah, well, for me, I think it started first with just buying secondhand and just loving what was available at op shops. And it wasn't until really I've gotten older and actually seen the true cost, and the more I learned, it just really shared how much impact shopping secondhand has. And I sit down with my clients, but for me and my clients, I really want to reiterate that the importance of personal style first, and that they're buying what's true to them. So when we're buying pieces that are true to ourselves and from our values, those garments are actually going to last longer, and we're going to take more care, and we're going to buy less, and we're going to buy pieces that we want to wear for a longer time. And so it's kind of just putting all those pieces together, but it does really need to bring it back to one. But you also, it's hard, like, you're not going to be able to buy all your values in one garment. So sometimes you've got to be flexible, where, you know, one time it might be that you are vegan and that's your predominant value. So you go down that path, but then to find the next thing, it might be buying something secondhand. So you really have to be flexible in this current market.
Okay. Timothy, I want to come on to you and just ask you about guilt. We talked about this before. Yes. When we hear these stats around, oh my goodness, you know, all of one garbage load of textiles entering landfill every second, it makes you feel guilty. And I personally have definitely wrestled with fashion guilt. I'm wondering if we're going to start having fashion shame, like we've had flight shame pre-COVID. You know, Greta popularized flight shame. Are we going to have fashion shame? And perhaps you might tell us how we might navigate the guilt. What do you feel as a fashion student when you hear these stories of trashing the planet? And how do you think we can practice our love for fashion in a sustainable and ethical way without the guilt trips?
Yes, and this is something that I've personally wrestled with a ton, as I'm sure.
You worry about even being a student, like
yes,
making things.
Absolutely. So I touched on this earlier, but it is really a case where it's difficult because we have to wrestle with this dichotomy that we're kind of facing, where fashion can be so amazing. It can be so beautiful and such a great kind of representation of people's identities. And it's tough because you have to also reconcile that beautiful aspect of fashion with the incredibly devastating effects that it has on a global scale. And I mean, I'm sure everyone here loves fashion. I don't think we would be attending this webinar if we didn't, but I think it's a case of trying to do the best that we can to make the best choices that we can for ourselves to lessen our impact. And I definitely think that we'll get to a point where we are experiencing fashion shame. Actually, I think that time is now.
Do you? Nice.
Very soon. But I think there are definitely alternatives that we can explore. And Alex has so brilliantly explained a couple of them that are really great options. I would say a couple of practical solutions are buy less, and buy better quality. It's really the case where...
So budget, and say I'm going to spend the same, but I'm going to buy fewer pieces that are
exactly
of a higher quality that I'm going to intend to keep for longer.
Yes, and making sure that these are pieces that you fit into your personal style and that you'll get a lot of wear out of. Kind of as an extension of that is fixing your garments, mending them, taking care of them, and really giving them a second life. We talk a lot about second-hand garments, but what's even more important is that you actually wear them and that you give them a second life. I think sometimes people, and I've been guilty of this in the past as well, have used thrift shopping or, those kind of things to fill the void that they have from not being able to consume regular fashion. And
but still huge volume, right? Exactly.
That's exactly right. And at the end of the day, if you're buying something from op shop, it doesn't really matter that you purchase it from op shop if it's just going to sit in your wardrobe forever and then you're just going to redonate it.
Just really quickly, Alex, I have to bounce back to you because you have actually given up clothes completely, buying anything secondhand or new for a whole year, right? Why?
I have too many clothes. Hands down. I have too much in my wardrobe and I really love all the garments that I have. So why should I buy more when I really need to just wear the clothes and give them enough time? Otherwise, I probably could wear almost something new twice in a year and I'd still get through everything. So
is this part of it is part of a broader movement, but what's your challenge? Did you join something or did you make it up for yourself? What?
Well, it was the, buy nothing new, no new clothes for a whole year. That was the challenge, I guess. For me, I guess being in being a stylist, being amongst fashion and dressing other people, I thought it would be quite challenging. But I think bringing it back to what I'm truly passionate about being dressing for your sense of style, it has allowed me just to own my looks and be re-wearing them and loving it. Also, I have to say though, COVID has kind of put a spanner in the works because,
Where to go?
Yeah, exactly. Nowhere to go, not styling as many people. So, but I'm dressing for myself and that's most important.
Okay, fantastic. I want to make sure that we do have time to answer a lot of these questions here, but Sandra, I'm just going to jump onto you and ask you about price. When we're talking, for example, about buying less and choosing well, it sounds like we're talking about investment pieces. That's the Vogue speak. It can be very intimidating. It makes people think they can't afford it. Is that the case? Does sustainable fashion always have to be the expensive option?
I think there's maybe two sides to this in that firstly, we've got to recognise that not everybody can afford the same types of clothing. And so having affordable options is really important in fashion. But affordability can take different shapes and forms. And at Good On You, we try to dispel the myth that all sustainable fashion is expensive. We've rated thousands of brands and hundreds of those are brands at the lower end that are at a lower price point and offer basics similar to some of the fast fashion brands that many people resort to when they don't think they can afford anything better. So yeah, I guess it's in researching, you can actually find similar comparable sustainable brands at a low price point. But the other side of it is what we've sort of already touched on a little bit, and that is considering that concept of cost per wear or price per wear, because something that might be really cheap up front, especially if it is from a fast fashion store that's all about this culture of using quickly and buying again, if it doesn't last long, then it's actually going to cost you more to keep replacing that garment over time. So if you're investing in these pieces that last a long time, then it becomes more affordable.
But also, let's not sugarcoat it. Someone pays the price for too cheap. And I'm sure that those of you who've just watched Freshly, The True Cost will be familiar with that idea. Someone down the bottom of the supply chain is paying for the cheapness that we're able to access some of this garbagey fashion for. But Timothy, how does this get political? I know you want to talk a bit on this. Does price lock some people out? And what what can we do about it? What happens when it becomes about privilege, and how can we make sure that we do allow everyone to take part in this and no one gets left behind?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it's a really important and kind of emerging topic, especially within the ethical fashion sphere. It is price, but I do think it's also education and awareness. I think those are the two pieces of the puzzle when we talk about ethical fashion. The first being education and awareness. It's just, the thing is the ethical fashion sphere is very much made up of a very certain type of person, and it's catered to a very certain type of person. And that person kind of generally tends to be women who are relatively well educated and relatively well off. And so unfortunately, it just becomes a case, and this is sometimes a class thing, where people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds might not have been exposed to the same types of information, the same types of systems that we kind of have at our fingertips. And the price is definitely a thing. The thing is, if you are able to purchase sometimes an ethical garment, which there are alternatives, as Sandra has mentioned, but if you are able to purchase an ethically made garment, you are that spending is probably coming from a place of privilege. The fact that you're able to make that choice. And actually, Tansy Hoskins, who I believe was in the True Cost as well, she did a brilliant op-ed about the concept that the people who are lining up for fast fashion labels, they're not the enemy. They're simply kind of people who have amazing. Yeah. They're people that have kind of been victims of the economic system that we live in. And in a lot of ways, an ethical garment might cost these people half their paycheck, their whole paycheck, possibly.
It's a thorny one. Perhaps we'll get onto that. Now, I want to make sure that we, perhaps we'll get onto asking you guys what you all think about that. I was just holding that up if you want to know about Tansy Hoskins. She wrote this book called Stitched Up, the Anti-Capitalist Book of Fashion. Behind my computer, I've got a lot of ethical fashion books, by the way. A lot of them written by me. Sorry. I can't help it. I want to just talk about some tips, because I really hope that people will walk away from this session today with some practical advice on how they can actually tackle fashion waste in their own lives. We've talked about supporting brands that embed circular practices into their design and who are really thinking that through from a product perspective. But what can we do at home when we're thinking about chucking some holy old t-shirt in the bin? Alex, we talked about choose well, buy less, but what as a thrifting obsessive would be your tips and hacks on how people can actually empower themselves to tackle this? Come on.
Okay, so firstly, I would say is going to your op shops as not number one, up to you, but that's my preference, is going there and sourcing your wardrobes secondhand. But also it's mending your clothes yourself. I have actually got a jacket and I did some visible mending. So visible meaning that you can see it. And I've got this vintage hoodie, and I've done a bit of visible mending there, and I chose to show it because I wanted to, share that this piece has history. I'm caring for it, and doing this, it's going to last longer, and it's got a story now to tell.
I love the story, and I also love that you don't have to be intimidated if you aren't perfect. Perfection is the enemy of action. I've got one more poll up for you there, and I would love for you all to just pop in the answer to that, which is, do you struggle to figure out what to do with your unwanted clothes? I'm going to ask each of you to share a tip because I want to get onto the questions. Sandra, do you have a tip? I feel like your Italian nonna taught you some of these textile saving tips. What was it?
For as long as I can remember, both my mother and grandmother, Italian heritage, used to mend everything, even when I wanted to rip jeans, holes in my jeans because it was cool. I would find the day that it was all mended, and so I learned from a really young age something that I'm grateful for today, just the basics of being able to sew. And I realised how many people I know that don't have those fundamentals of being able to sew back a button on a shirt or fix a tear in a cool way, like Alex was just talking about. So yeah, it's definitely about those practical skills of mending that really aren't that hard if I can do it. I'm definitely not a designer, or I have skills. I'm not a fashion student like Timothy, but I've been able to learn the basics.
But there's also something so powerful about that, which is that it's really only been in a couple of generations that we've forgotten the universality of being able to do this stuff. It was just what you were taught, people knew. And now my generation, I think, was the first one where we're like, oh, we don't know that, we don't care, we'll buy stuff and chuck it out. We need to come back to the granny skills. Timothy, can you share a tip with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm right there with you, Claire. I feel like, especially among my sphere, no one knows how to put a button back on a jacket.
Probably not even in fashion school, and that is a sad fact.
Yes, absolutely. But I think that a lot of people are intimidated by the idea of mending clothes. Right. They're intimidated by the idea of sewing. But there are so many resources out there that I personally have used and are really helpful. The first one and the best one I can recommend is YouTube. If you just hop onto YouTube, there are a billion different tutorials on how to sew back a button, on how to hem up a pair of pants, on how to sometimes doing minor alterations like taking in the waist of a pair of jeans, and that will fit you better and you don't have to throw away.
Brilliant. Actually, I'm going to just take this moment to plug the next it's not a webinar, but the next session online that Waverley Council is staging. And I shared this actually on our website the other day. On the 8th of August, they're running a DIY clothes mending workshop for beginners. There'll be a link that will pop in the chat there, but it's brilliant. It's basically empowering everybody to have a go. But now I want to make sure that we answer some of your questions. There's another poll that I've just put up there, but there's a lot here. One of them very important, Sandra. Do you have any jobs? Because they want to work at Good On You. Did you see that? Is so cute. Okay, so Astrid says, any chance Good On You is hiring? Honestly, it's my dream place to work. That is not a question, but I like it. Well, it is.
Thanks, Astrid. Appreciate it.
But not a question for feedback. All right. So while I go through here, what I would love for you guys to do is pop your questions here that are like practical questions on what we can do with the crazy problem of fashion waste. Sorry, I'm actually half blind and should probably put on my glasses. There's a question here about microfibers. Does everybody know about the story of synthetics? So someone here asked a question about what happens with microfibers from clothes. So I think it's more than 60%, I'm not sure the exact number, of our clothes are made from synthetic textiles. So that's essentially plastic. Polyester, nylon, acrylic, these fibers are derived from oil and they're basically plastic. And if you think about a fiber on a wool sweater, for example, that might disappear and biodegrade, but a fiber from a synthetic textile, where does it end up? We talked before about there is no away. So if you want us to share some links around the story of microfiber waste, we can pop some in the chat there, and it's very salient for Plastic Free July. But essentially, every time you wash synthetic clothes, thousands and thousands of tiny microfibers finer than a human hair wash out with the wastewater, and the ocean being downhill from everything, that's where they end up. So it's not a good story. And in terms of what we can do about that, I think that at the moment, there's very little concrete knowledge about it. We can reduce, we can use washing bags. Everyone know about that?
Wash less as well.
Mm-hmm.
Wash on lower temperatures. Actually, there was a study that came out of, I think it was maybe Leeds University in the UK, that was saying that if you wash between 25 and 30 degrees, then apparently that can help. I can share a link to that. I learned it from Fashion Revolution. They've got some good stuff on their website around the research. Excuse me while I look at these questions.
Let me just tell you quickly while you look at that,
Please
Claire.
do. Yes.
An industry tip that
here we go.
use for like when we've got dancers that are doing a quick turnaround, or like in the performance world, we use a concoction.
Oh, because you should say, because you style for the television.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes, I style on television shows of many different shows. And often they'll have to rewear the same outfits. So we spray down their clothes with a concoction of water and vodka. And the vodka actually kills the bacteria and cleans it and gives it more of a better smell. Yeah. And that way we reuse it the next time without having to wash it.
Has anyone else got anything to say on this? Because actually, coming back to granny skills, we didn't used to wash so profligately. Now, if you do have a wardrobe full of synthetic sports kit, you're going to have to wash it. But actually, we overwash and we over dry clean clothes. So, for example, you don't need to dry clean that jacket every time you wear it. You can air things. I always do this with vintage. You've probably got tips on that. But actually, we can cut down the amount of water we waste and of, if it's synthetics, microfiber pollution, just by washing less, spot clean, bit of an air.
Sun is great.
There is a question here, and I don't know who would like to answer it, which is, what about the environmental cost? It's from Miranda. Thank you, Miranda. What about the environmental cost of fashion beyond of fashion manufacturing costs and dyes? Sorry, I'm finding it really hard to read. This has disappeared. I need Alan. Can someone help me? Office? Hello, help. What about the environmental cost of fashion and dyes, and the fact that bamboo plantations have taken over natural habitats and can be unsustainably harvested? Okay, does anyone know about bamboo? Because I bet you do, Sandra. This is one of those kind of, it's touted as the eco wonder fibre that's definitely the more sustainable answer, but it isn't necessarily the case, is it?
Yeah, well, the positive side of bamboo is that it's a regenerative input, in that bamboo actually grows back quite quickly. It's obviously a natural fibre, as opposed
no pesticides,
to synthetics, no pesticides, no issues around microplastics. But unfortunately, most of bamboo, in the process of generating it into a thread, it requires a lot of chemicals, and often those chemicals aren't reused but end up in water waste, in wastewater. So the environmental impacts can be quite significant. There are a few brands and innovators in the development of the material and the thread that are trying at least to use the chemicals in a closed loop. It goes back to that circular economy principles again, and in doing so, they're able to minimise a lot of the impacts.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sandra. And what that speaks to is the complexity, because it depends who's produced it. And so again, that's, there's a comment here that says there's a lot to learn to be dressed 100% sustainably. That is true. I've got a question here from Nick to all the panelists, and it is, do big luxury brands burn unsold stock rather than put it on sale? I've got opinions. Anyone else?
It was pretty common practice, and possibly still is for most luxury brands. Burberry was called out in the media, I'm not sure, maybe about 6 months ago now, probably longer. But yeah. Yeah, and I think, that raising of awareness, the resulting horror of many Burberry customers and other shoppers has put a spotlight on the issue, and actually it made some luxury brands implement policies where they no longer burn their excess products.
Thank you, Nick. Very interesting question. If you want to learn more around this, yes, all brands routinely burn unsold stock. Brands routinely burn IP prints, for example, because they don't want those to end up unsold to other brands. And Sandra's absolutely right. The Burberry story shone a bright light on it. But in fact, Burberry had announced and made it public in one of their quarterly reports exactly how much stock they had destroyed. It included perfume. It was 35 million or 36 million pounds worth. But they were actually doing the right thing. They were, not by burning it, or destroying it, but by revealing the fact. Many more brands try to keep it a secret. There's a good news ending to this, which is that France has just outlawed the burning of fashion. So there you go. There's change coming. You can pop your jeans in the freezer. Thank you. So that is exactly what I was hoping that we would get out of this community call, if you like, and webinar, because there are so many ways that we can actually change how we treat clothes and how we prolong their lives and how we wash them. Yeah, you can put your jeans in the freezer. And there's another one here, which is from Cara, which says vinegar is great for refreshing things too, and sunshine. Okay, Bobby has asked, can you recommend a book for an eco book club that I'm running to raise awareness about the fashion industry? I'd love you all to share your tips. Timothy, what are you reading, or what have you read?
Well, the book that you actually showed, Tansy Hoskins, that one's a great one. It's just really important, I think, around raising awareness. It's really important around just shining a light on very much so the systems that are in place, which is something that people don't really think about, the systems that are in place that kind of force us to consume the way that we do. And it's something that sometimes doesn't get a lot of, it's very easy to look at people's personal autonomy. It's less easy to examine the huge picture systems that force people to act the way that they do.
Alex, do you have a book that you would recommend? And I'm going to ask you, Sandra, but I'm also going to ask you to comment on some of these questions, which are, just so you can think it through while Alex talks about a book, is Bamboo Worse Than Cotton? That's from Winnie. And from Second Nature, or from Marina. Actually, we'll come on to that one. But yeah, linen, I'm not sure who else that has disappeared, but is linen a better choice? Alex, share with us a book recommendation, please.
Sure. I would like to recommend Claire's book.
Oh, stop it. That's not allowed. You got to do one that isn't me.
Oh, all right. Well, Turning the Tide on Plastic, that's by Lucy Siegel. That's really interesting. It's talking about plastic through so many different avenues, and it just really gets your mind thinking about how much plastic is in so many different elements that we have, and the things that we need to be focused on and to think differently. And every time that we make a purchase, it's like, how does this impact our environment? How does it impact, and what is a better choice? And so
brilliant. I was trying to look for it, but it must be in the bedroom. But Rebecca Prinz-Ruiz, who we mentioned before, who is the founder of Plastic Free July, has got a new book out, which is all about how she formed that organisation, and it's terrific and also full of practical tips. Sandra, what's your read suggestion? But also, do you want to try and answer those fabric questions for us? Let's just talk briefly about linen. Obviously, good from a microfiber perspective, but why else is linen a good choice?
So one of the problems with cotton, which many of us would assume is, a natural regenerative fibre as well, is that it uses a lot of water in its production, especially if it's not organic, and most of cotton in circulation is not organic, and it also uses a lot of pesticides traditionally. Most of cotton farming in Australia, but overseas, uses huge amounts of pesticides. So from a sustainability perspective,
recycled would always be the best. There's very little recycled cotton out there, but I have been seeing a bit more of it crop up. What would be your book recommendation?
Well, I also read and listen to everything Claire does, but another person that I follow is a fantastic writer and journalist is Elizabeth Klein.
Oh, brilliant. Elizabeth Klein is terrific. And her book is called Overdressed, The Shockingly High Cost of Cheap Clothes or Cheap Fashion. Very good. Here's one, Junkyard Planet by Adam Minter. Terrific. Has everyone heard of that? Now, if you really want to get down and dirty with recycling, he is your man. I'm going to plug myself. I have a podcast with him where I interviewed him about his adventures in Junkland, and basically he is the guru on all things waste, recycled, and where it ends up. So I would really recommend, if people are interested, seeking out Adam Minter. He's an American and a Bloomberg journalist, and very, very, very interesting. Oh, and got to share this one, Modern Mending by Erin Lewis Fitzgerald. Does everyone know about her? She's terrific. So she's going to teach you how to crochet how to embroider around the holes in your jumper and do what Alex was doing there with the back of her jacket. We haven't got a lot more time. I would like to throw this to all of you as a bit of a workshop for everyone who has joined us today. We thought about trying to give you some practical things that we would love for you to feel inspired to take away and do. We do hope that just having these conversations and hearing about some of the issues around fashion will start you thinking about what you can do in your own lives. And we were thinking about how useful it can be to journal. And when you sit down and you really try and write lists about what you care about, we talked before about values, and also where some of the problems in your own waste life lie. If you could see behind this door, you'd see I've got some. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a job, which is to commit to a goal to tackle textile waste. And we thought that actually the council was going to follow up with you. So we've got 3 ideas that we thought might be of use, and they are, and I want you to pick one, but I'd also say you can pick your own, you can make your own up. But could you commit to one of the above or another one? One would be to learn basic mending skills, and we'll share this. 2 would be to share what you've learned or picked up today around sustainable fashion with people in your community or in your family or who you work with, just people who may not be switched on to this. So 2 would be sharing what you've learned. And 3 would be to challenge yourself not to throw any textiles in the bin for 12 months. Now, Alex is not going to buy anything new at all, even if it's secondhand, for 12 months. But could you commit to throwing nothing textile based into your bin, your landfill bin, for 12 months? So have a think about those. We're going to share them with you, and then we're going to follow up. So what I would love for you to do is not decide now, but actually afterwards, when you have some time, muse on what you learned by watching The True Cost. Think around some of the things that everybody raised here, and journal out the things that freak you out and that you care about when it comes to fashion waste. And then pick one of these goals and commit to tackling it, and we'll follow up and see if you did it. I want to just ask each of the panelists just to share some thoughts around what we might do, what your goals would be, and how we might leave this session. Timothy.
Yeah, I think my ultimate goal, mine's more of a personal one.
Yeah.
To be able to continue to find ways to use and to use recycled fabrics, eco fabrics within the work that I do. And I think that's a really important one, that we are always striving towards thinking about the best way to use what we have. I think about that often when I'm doing my schoolwork as a student, but also at work at the social outfit. It really goes hand in hand for us. And it's something that I'm so passionate about, and something that it's really this, being able to represent the social outfit like this is a dream come true, because their stories is really one that I believe in so deeply.
There's a little comment here, which is from Maddie from Boomerang Bags, a brilliant organisation that upcycles and tackles waste in their products and their messaging. And she says, recycling will only work if there's demand, so if there's a buyer for these products. So everyone, make sure that you check out Good On You and you check out the social outfit. Alex, closing remarks. Gonna ever buy anything new ever again?
I will. But it is with really being very considerate and really asking myself the questions before I purchase. Do I really need it? Do I truly love it? Am I going to get so many wears out of it for years to come? And is it really true to my style? Because when you shop to your personal style, what you truly love, then that way you're going to keep those garments in your wardrobe and wear them for years and years to come.
Love, that's a good tip. We've actually put these commitments into the poll, but I still want you to journal them. It's going to help. Oh, they've disappeared. Share them again. I want to read them. Okay, so actually that's terrific. Nearly half of you would like to take up learning mending skills. I think that's such a brilliant goal. You can all see it there, can't you? So I won't read it. Sandra, would you like to share perhaps your goal, but also some closing remarks on how we can all be part of a more sustainable, less wasteful fashion future?
So I'm going to, inspired by Timothy and the social outfit, I'm going to have a go at making my own face mask. I'm down in Melbourne and through here, and I have plenty of used clothing and some cool textiles that I could use to make my own mask. But the social outfit is using your textile offcuts, I think, to make masks, which just shows the ingenuity of a brand like that thinks creatively about how to use waste. And so I've been inspired to do that for myself as well. And yeah, I guess just final thoughts is yes, these issues are overwhelming. But there's loads of solutions out there that are trying to make it practical and easy. And just the most important thing you can do is recognise that your actions do matter. And, you know, it takes time, and it takes lots of us taking action. But imagine if we were all just making small changes, how powerful that would be.
Thank you. And I would also say that we've touched on very briefly so many different things in this short session, because you could literally do it for 3 days and not get to the bottom of it. I would point you to Good On You as a resource, because they actually have loads and loads of fantastic articles and stories around all of these issues. So you can really use it as kind of a reading resource. We'll also share those books that all of us had recommended in the follow-up and in the chat. And I feel like we are out of time, but I did just want to talk about masks really briefly. Someone there had said, what do we do with holey undies? I don't know, but I do happen to know that you can make a mask out of a sock. Has everyone seen that? Has everyone seen that? It was like all over Twitter. I'm not sure how effective it is. Definitely not medical grade, but a clean sock can be very easily cut. We'll find it and share it. And all you know, it's a no-sew mask. All you have to do is cut it specifically. You cut a little slits, and then it can, you can imagine the little heel goes over here. Anyway, I think that that's just a perfect example, or one of many examples, of how being creative is actually one of the solutions out of being so wasteful. And there are so many hacks and so many ideas that can really help us stop throwing textile waste in the bin. So that's my goal. I'm going to do it a whole year. It's going to be hard. You can check in with me. I believe that we are out of time. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to share your evening with us. We'll all have a bash at answering any of the questions that we didn't get to. And I would encourage you to follow up on the resources, and please thank all of our panelists for sharing their evening with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.